NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play. What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here. Bring your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. Okay, so there's only been 3 games since my last NetsBoy episode, in which during that stretch the Nets went 2-1, which is what I expected them to go. However, it didn't really happen the way I really expected, which we'll discuss a little bit later on when we talk about what I believe is one of the worst losses of the year. Of course, I'm pretty sure I've said that about like 4 different losses already this year that I think is one of the worst losses. But I feel like that Hornets loss on Wednesday night was one of the worst, if not the worst, which, like I said, we'll discuss that a little bit later on when we look at the last couple games. But before we talk about that, we've got to talk about the news, or the latest news that just came out Thursday afternoon, and that was that the Nets made the decision on who they're going to let go and release from the roster to make room for Wilson Chandler, and it was indeed Iman Shumpert, as predicted by moi. Look, when you look at the whole scheme of things, it kind of made sense that it was going to be Iman Shumpert. First of all, I don't feel like anybody really should have been let go, but that wasn't a choice, because you could have made a case to keep every single one of these players that the Nets had, because they all have their pros and cons, but mostly pros. So this was a really tough decision that Sean Marks and Kenny Atkinson had to make, but they had to make it. Wilson Chandler has to be on this roster. Like, he is a key player for this team moving forward. He was signed to be a key player. You can't just say no to Wilson Chandler. So someone had to go. So Iman Shumpert was the guy who the Nets chose to move away from and let go. There's a couple reasons why this makes the most sense. The first reason is that he was the last guy to be put on the roster. He was literally a filler specifically because Wilson Chandler was suspended and they had the roster space. So he was never part of the big picture. He was never expected to be a rotational player on this team come the offseason. Sean Marks literally just had a roster space, had a vacancy that he could use. That I feel like the only reason why he chose Iman Shumpert and did it was because of the injuries to LeVert and Durant, obviously, and Kyrie Irving. The Nets were banged up, so they needed some help in the wing spot, and they said, let's get Iman Shumpert. So I feel like that's one of the things that played into the decision was he was always just a filler guy. He was always meant to be just a filler guy, and so I feel like the Nets just stuck to their game plan. The other reason is you just have to look objectively to the other options. You're not getting rid of David Nwaba. He's played so great that it would be so unfair to get rid of him. So that's the first thing. So because he was somebody that someone suggested or people thought could be a case. Kurucs and Musa were probably the 2 most likely other candidates. But here's what you have to remember about those guys. Yes, Kurucs, first of all, is a shell of himself. He's been out of the rotation. He was actually demoted to the G League and played a couple games with the Long Island Nets. Yes, he's a shell of himself. He's been terrible when he has played. He's out of the rotation. He is what he is. But I brought this up in my last NetsBoy episode. You can't forget about how he contributed to the team last year and just really how good he really can be. If he had his head on straight and isn't dealing with the legal issues that he's dealing off the court and confidence issues, because probably all playing into it, I think we would all say Rodions Kurucs is a rotational player on this team. He's just kind of fallen out of it. So I felt it would have been a little hasty and radical to move on from him when we saw who he could be last year. And Zana Musa, this kid has a lot of upside. Yes, he's played very inconsistently, and there's some games that you just want to pull your hair out saying, what are you doing? But Sean Marks and Kenny Atkinson really like him. And one thing that was kind of overlooked about both these guys, they're 21 years old. All right, they are far, far, far from being finished products. Iman Shumpert, he's a finished product. He is what he is. All right, he's a good defensive player who's capable of knocking down the perimeter shot. That's who Iman Shumpert is. He's a veteran. He can give you great defense, which he did with the Nets. That's been the best thing about him. And he can knock down the three-point shot. That's who he is. Musa and Kurucs, there's still a lot of upside to both those guys, especially Musa. Because several NBA scouts said that he was the second best European player in the draft last year, obviously behind, Luka Doncic, who's, one of the top players in the NBA right now. So a lot of scouts believe that Musa was the second best behind him of all the European players, because that's the type of skill set he has. And you can see the glimpses from Musa here and there. You can see like, oh, wow, he actually may not be that bad. But then he'll do something really stupid and turn the ball over, and you're like, oh, my goodness, this guy. But the point is, both him and Kurucs have a lot of upside. And I don't think the Nets and Sean Marks and Kenny Atkinson wanted to move away from those potential of those guys just right now. Maybe at the end of the year or going into next year, if neither of them show any development, maybe they move away. But they're 21 and they're just very raw, but they have so much upside. I just didn't believe that they were going to get rid of those guys. And then there was Theo Pinson, who was another candidate that made some sense for the Nets to get rid of. But I brought this up in my last NetsBoy episode as well. Pinson is, right now, he's the backup point guard for the Nets. He was literally brought on this team to be the third-string point guard in case of injury, and which has happened. You get rid of Pinson, who's the backup point guard? Are they signing Jalen Hand out of the G League, who was their second-round draft pick last year? He's a tweener as well, and who knows if he's going to be any better than Pinson. You got to know what you get out of Pinson. An inconsistent player. That's what he is. But it just didn't make sense at the moment with the way the roster is constructed that you would eliminate your third-string point guard when your starting point guard's already out, which would only leave Dinwiddie as the only true point guard on the roster. And what are you going to do? You got to sign Jalen Hand or call him up? Well, guess what? Unless you sign him to a 10-day contract, you can't sign him because you can't sign anybody because you're out of roster spaces. So that was the whole reason behind all this shuffle. You know what I mean? Like, that's why Pinson just didn't make sense that he was going to be the guy, because if you were to get rid of Pinson and then try to sign another point guard later on, well, then you're in the same predicament you were already in because you didn't have enough spaces in the first place. So it just didn't make sense. So Pinson was the reason why for that reason. Because I will say this. Between Pinson and Musa, they've played the worst. And Kurucs, those three guys have played the worst. And they're the logical choices from the eye test. But sometimes there's other factors you need to take in consideration. And then there was one more factor that made the most sense of why it was going to be Iman Shumpert. And this is something that I didn't even bring up last episode because I wasn't even 100% sure of it until most recently. Shumpert didn't even have a guaranteed contract. Shumpert signed a contract that wasn't guaranteed until January, meaning he had to stay on the team until January for it to kick in to be a guarantee. That's all you needed to know that Shumpert was going to be the guy to get released. Because the Nets don't have to pay him for the rest of the year. If they were to get rid of Kurucs or Musa, who were on the team last year, they would have had to pay those guys for the rest of the year because they have those contracts that kicked in last season. So it just made the most sense that Shumpert was going to be the guy just because of that. Because financially, if you can get out of paying somebody, why wouldn't you? So that's why it makes the most sense. The Nets paid Shumpert for the 12, 15 games he played, and now he's a free agent, and now he's on his way. And like I said, I always think this was always the plan, and I feel like Iman Shumpert was in on it, because Shumpert had nothing but positive things to say about the Nets. He said, classy organization, appreciate my time there. I actually think that Sean Marks signed Shumpert and said, listen, you're right now on no team. No team's looking at you right now. Come sign for us. Play for a couple weeks, prove to people that you can still play at this level, and when we release you, hopefully some other team will offer you a contract. And I think some team will go out there and try to sign Iman Shumpert because I think he proved that he can be an adequate rotational player on a contending team. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Iman Shumpert. So I think that was always the plan. And like I said, the fact that there was a non-guaranteed contract and the fact that they didn't want to get rid of the young talent players in Kurucs and Musa, and Pinson's the only true backup point guard on the team right now, third string, it just made sense. It had to be Shumpert. So, Iman Shumpert, good luck to you. Thank you for your brief services with the Nets. It's unfortunate, but so long. Okay, so spent a little bit more time about talking about that than I thought, because I really wanted to talk about the disastrous Charlotte Hornets game on Wednesday. The Nets started off the last three games by beating the Hornets in Charlotte in a convincing fashion yet again, and it was a good game. And then followed up with one of the better wins of the year. Probably this is a rivals the Rockets win that they had earlier on in the year by beating the Denver Nuggets. one of the best teams in the Western Conference, though they're inconsistent this year, but they're still better than the Nets, and the Nets managed to beat them. So here we are thinking, wow, the Nets actually look like a good team. They're beating good teams now. They have the Hornets in Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and the Nets come out and they build up this 20-point lead, this great 20-point lead. And I'm watching the game, and I'm being honest, I'm barely watching the game because my mind is focused on other things because this didn't feel like it needed to be a game I had to focus on. I thought the Nets had it in hand. And then all of a sudden, in the third quarter, the Hornets go to a zone. And the Nets acted like they'd never seen that before in their life and that they had no idea what a zone was. They couldn't do anything. Joe Harris was missing shots. Taurean Prince was being an idiot. Some of those plays that Taurean Prince was trying to make and shoot was just so dumb. Shumpert, who was playing at the time, he was missing shots and taking dumb shots. Garrett Temple wasn't able to hit any shots. That's the way you beat the zone, is dribble penetration and perimeter game, right? You either need a guard who can penetrate the zone and kick out to shooters. Well, they were able to do the penetration with Dinwiddie, but the shooters were not able to knock down any shots, and that's why all of a sudden the Hornets started gradually building up and getting back. And next thing you know, the Hornets have the lead, and then it's just a back-and-forth slugfest to the end of the game, and Graham, for the Hornets, dropped 40 points and beat the Nets. That's really what it just came down to. It's just the Nets could not get anything going once they switched to the zone, and I also couldn't get anything going because of that second unit finally showed how bad it could be. Because I was saying this, that the second unit that the Nets been putting out there with Theo Pinson, Nwaba, Shumpert, DeAndre Jordan, and Musa, that second unit has played really well the last couple games. And I had always said to myself, there's going to be a point where that second unit's going to rear its ugly head because all those guys are inconsistent. There's not one player in that second unit that you can say, I can trust that guy to get me a basket or make a play. And sure enough, during that stretch, in addition to the zone situation that the Hornets were doing, it was those players that were out there that caused the run to happen. And just look back at it. Once that lineup came in is when the run really started. And then Kenny Atkinson tried to answer by putting Garrett Temple in, and Taurean Prince, but by then it was too late. It was already like a 5-6 point game, and they already had the momentum. So I said this before, the Nets need Kyrie Irving back, not because, he's the superstar, but they need to put Dinwiddie back in reserve role because he needs to be the leader of that second unit because that second unit is just so inconsistent. And like I said, they've been playing well of late, but they all played like crap in that third and fourth quarter, which was a big contributing factor to why the Nets lost that game. They should not have lost that game. It's as simple as that. You're up 40. Excuse me. I wish you're up 40. You're up. That would have been really bad. You're up 20, all right, to the Hornets, a team that struggled all year at home. So you're in Brooklyn, and the Hornets are coming off a back-to-back. This is the second game of a back-to-back. How do you blow that game? That's what's so mind-boggling. That's why I think it's one of the worst losses. Everything is in your favor. Home game, 20-point lead, not playing on a back-to-back. How? But at the end of the day, poor performance by the second unit, poor execution against the zone, and Graham went off for the Hornets and dropped 40 points. And really, the whole team played really well in that second half for the Hornets. So you do have to tip your cap to the Hornets for coming out and making that effort. But at the end of the day, the Nets really should have won that game. And that's a big, big disappointing loss. Even though they went 2-1 because they beat the game against beat the Nuggets, it's still a shame because the Nets really do indeed need to stockpile as many wins as they possibly can. Because next couple games for the Nets, gonna be a big challenge. So they got the first thing they've got is on Saturday, they're going to Toronto and playing the Raptors. Look, Siakam's having a great year. Van Vliet's having a great year. The Raptors are the defending champs. They've shown up this year. This is not going to be an easy game. I'm not going to sit here and say the Nets should win that game because I don't think they should because it's also in Toronto. But I do believe that that's a game that they can steal. Just like how they stole the game against the Nuggets, they stole a game against the Rockets. I feel like that's a game, the Nets, that if they all come to play and they learn from the disaster they had against Charlotte, they might be able to steal that game against them, because that's what they're going to need to do. Because after they've got the Raptors, they then have the 76ers, and we all know how good they are, then the Pelicans, which is a winnable game, and then the Spurs, which, even though the Spurs have had a down year as well, they're still the San Antonio Spurs, and they always somehow have great moments and come to play. So this is a rough stretch, especially with the Raptors and the 76ers. But if they can get past the 76ers and the Raptors, and they can win one of those two games, well, then they could actually build up their record again, because the Pelicans, that's a winnable game. The Spurs is a winnable game. Then they have the Hawks. That's a very winnable game. The Knicks, that's a winnable game. They have 4 winnable games after the next 2 games. So if they can go 1-1, and so if they can beat one of those 2 teams, and then continue to build, and then maybe go 3-1 the next 4, they're going to build that record, and that's going to put them in a really good situation. Because right now, they're 13-11, but if they do go 4-2 the next 6 games, right, and get to 19-13, they are setting themselves up to hit that 45 win mark and making themselves set up for a decent showing and a decent, run. Kyrie Irving, I don't know when he's coming back. Karis LeVert, don't know when he's coming back. Kenny Atkinson just says they're doing on the court activities. Who knows? I think it's still going to be at least another week for Kyrie and at least another 2 weeks for Karis. That's my opinion. I have no medical background at all or any other, thing to tell me that, source telling me that. That's just my opinion. But we'll see what happens. So there you have it. Wrapping up this NetsBoy episode. Let me know what you guys think about that terrible loss to Charlotte. If you agree with me that when it's said and done, Shumpert was the most logical choice. And let me know if you're excited like I am to see Wilson Chandler, because he's got 1 game to go. He's got one more game to go before he can come back. And I'm pretty pumped, because I think he's going to really help. He's going to help that second unit for sure, which, as I just said, they need help there. So let me know what you guys think. Keep your eyes open to the next NetsBoy. And until then, this is NetsBoy, signing off.